What if I told you there was an empire so vast, so powerful, and so influential that history itself tried to erase it? I'm not talking about Atlantis or some mythical kingdom. I'm talking about a real world-shaping civilization that you've probably never heard of, not because they were insignificant, but because they were too significant. This is the story of the empire that history forgot, or more accurately, the empire that history was forced to forget. For centuries, our understanding of the ancient world has been dominated by a few key players: Rome, Greece, Egypt, Persia. Their stories are etched into our textbooks. Their monuments still stand as testaments to their glory. But what if this picture is incomplete? What if there's a giant missing piece of the puzzle? A power that rose from the dust, challenged the giants of its time, and then vanished from our collective memory, almost as if by design. This isn't just a forgotten footnote. This is a deliberate erasure. We're going to uncover the clues, follow the breadcrumbs left behind by rogue archaeologists and defiant texts, and piece together the story of an empire that was so threatening to the established order, its memory had to be buried. Why was it so dangerous? What did they know? And who went to such great lengths to hide them from us? Stick with me, because we're about to dig up the truth. To begin our journey, we have to travel back over 3,000 years to the Bronze Age. This was a time of titans. The new kingdom of Egypt was at its peak. The Mycenaean Greeks were building their legendary citadels, and the Babylonian and Assyrian empires were vying for control in Mesopotamia. It was a world connected by trade, diplomacy, and constant warfare. And right in the middle of it all, controlling the vital crossroads of civilization, was the Hittite Empire. Now, you might have heard the name Hittite, maybe as a brief mention in a history class or a biblical story. But the scale of their power is almost never truly explained. From their capital, Hattusa, located in modern-day Turkey, the Hittites forged an empire that stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Euphrates River. They weren't just a regional power. They were a superpower. They were the equals of Egypt, the rivals of Assyria, and the masters of a vast, multi-ethnic state. So, how did an empire of this magnitude just fade into obscurity? Unlike the pyramids of Egypt or the Colosseum of Rome, the Hittite legacy wasn't carved in stone for all to see. Their cities were built primarily from mud brick, which over millennia dissolved back into the earth. When their empire collapsed around 1200 BCE, their cities were abandoned, burned, and forgotten, literally melting away into the hills of Anatolia. For nearly 3,000 years, Hattusa was just a ghost, its location unknown. It was until the early 20th century that archaeologists finally uncovered the ruins and began to grasp the sheer size of what they had found. But a crumbling city isn't enough to erase an empire. The real reason the Hittites were buried runs deeper. It lies in the archives of their enemies and successors. When a new power rises, it often rewrites history to legitimize its own rule. The victors, as they say, write the history books. The Greeks and later the Romans, who built their cultural foundations on what came after the Bronze Age collapse, had little interest in celebrating a dead empire that didn't fit neatly into their own origin stories. The Hittites were outsiders, speaking a strange language and worshiping different gods. It was easier to just leave them out. They became a footnote, a minor tribe, their true power minimized until they were practically invisible. The evidence for this deliberate downplaying is staggering. For instance, we all know about the famous Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BCE, often touted as a great victory for the Egyptian pharaoh, Ramesses the Great. If you look at the temples in Egypt, you'll see magnificent carvings depicting Ramesses single-handedly routing the Hittite hordes. It's a fantastic piece of propaganda. But what those carvings done to tell you is what we discovered in the Hittite archives: a peace treaty, the world's first known international peace treaty. In fact, this treaty, a copy of which is now displayed at the United Nations headquarters, shows a very different story. It wasn't a decisive Egyptian victory. It was a strategic stalemate. The Hittites fought the full might of the new kingdom of Egypt to a standstill. They were so powerful that the mighty Rameses II could not defeat them and was forced to negotiate a truce, treating the Hittite king as his equal, his brother. This one document completely shatters the narrative of Egyptian dominance and reveals the Hittites as a co-superpower of the age. For centuries, we only had Egypt's side of the story. The discovery of the Hittite version was like finding a secret transcript that changed everything we thought we knew. And it wasn't just their military might that made them a threat. The Hittites were innovators. They were among the first civilizations to master ironworking on a large scale. While their neighbors were still fighting with bronze, the Hittites were forging stronger, more durable weapons and tools. This gave them a massive technological edge, a secret weapon that helped them carve out their empire. Imagine an army with superior steel facing an army with softer bronze. This technological leap was revolutionary, and it's a key part of their story that was largely overlooked. Furthermore, their system of governance was remarkably sophisticated. While other empires were often ruled by a single divine king with absolute power, the Hittite king was more of a first among equals. He was bound by law and advised by a council of nobles, known as the Pancus. This system of checks and balances was incredibly advanced for its time, a precursor to legal and political ideas that wouldn't re-emerge for centuries. Perhaps this model of distributed power was also a dangerous idea to the absolute monarchies that followed, another reason to scrub it from the record. But the most compelling reason for the Hittites' erasure might be the nature of their collapse. Around 1200 BCE, the entire Bronze Age world came crashing down. Great empires fell, trade routes vanished, and entire cities were wiped off the map. This period is known as the Late Bronze Age collapse, one of the greatest mysteries in human history. The Hittite Empire was one of its biggest casualties. Their central government disintegrated, and their people scattered. In the chaos that followed, new peoples and new powers rose from the ashes: the Phrygians, the Lydians, and eventually the Greeks. These new civilizations built their world on top of the Hittite ruins, both literally and figuratively. They had their own heroes, their own gods, and their own histories to write. The Hittites became the Old Ones, the mysterious predecessors whose time had passed. Their language, an ancient Indo-European tongue, one of the oldest ever recorded, died out. Their cuneiform script was replaced by alphabetic writing. An entire world of knowledge, literature, and history was lost because no one was left who could read it. It took the discovery of tens of thousands of clay tablets at Hattusa and the painstaking work of deciphering a long-dead language to finally give the Hittites their voice back. These tablets revealed a civilization that was not only powerful but also deeply human. We found royal decrees, but also marriage contracts and letters between merchants. We found epic myths, but also humble prayers from people worried about their health or their harvest. We discovered a queen, Paduepa, who was a political force in her own right, corresponding with world leaders like Rameses II as an equal. This wasn't a monolithic, faceless empire. It was a living, breathing society. So the Hittite Empire wasn't just forgotten. It was a victim of circumstance, propaganda, and the relentless forward march of history. Their mud brick cities melted into the earth. Their rivals wrote them out of the official story. And the catastrophic collapse of their world silenced their voices for 3,000 years. They were too powerful to be remembered fondly by their competitors and too thoroughly destroyed to leave an undeniable legacy like the pyramids. What this story teaches us is that history is not a fixed, complete account of the past. It's a narrative constructed from the fragments that survive. And sometimes, the most important parts of that narrative are the ones that are missing. The Hittites are a stark reminder that entire chapters of the human story can be torn out and cast aside. It makes you wonder, what other great civilizations, what other powerful truths are still buried beneath the soil, waiting for someone to dig them up and challenge the story we think we know? The tale of the Hittites is more than just ancient history. It's a detective story that exposes the biases and gaps in our own knowledge. They were the hidden superpower, the empire that history tried to erase. But thanks to the resilience of clay tablets and the curiosity of modern explorers, their story is finally being told. And it's a story that deserves to be heard. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the past. If you enjoyed uncovering this lost empire, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries of history. Let me know in the comments what other forgotten histories you'd like to explore next. See you in the next one.